So there is some cool stuff, some almost controversial stuff happening right now in the world of, nutrition and diet. I would almost go as far as to say that there is a subset of individuals out there who are almost attempting a nutritional revolution or a coup d'etat of current standard nutritional practices. This being things like flexible dieting, if it fits your macros, essentially the belief that an individual could get lean and lose body fat, assuming they eat in a calorie deficit. This would essentially hold true no matter what other factors are involved, whether you are eating a high fat or a high carbohydrate diet. Assuming you are putting yourself into a calorie deficit, you are essentially burning more energy on a daily basis than you are consuming in the form of food, and obviously having a relatively high protein intake for, the good stuff. Other than that, yes, you would essentially get lean, and all the other factors are they're not as important as the major stuff. At the peak of it all, simply calories in versus calories out. These individuals tend to move away from that notion of thought, and they believe that fat gain, fat loss, and unfortunately things like obesity are at its core a hormonal dysregulation problem. Essentially meaning that it's due to hormones, not due to simply calories in versus calories out. These are individuals who swear by nutritional methodologies such as the ketogenic diet, in general the low carb, high fat diet, and to some extent intermittent fasting. All these three things are just it's almost like they're subsets. There's one major tree and these branches come off into these different things like the keto and intermittent fasting. But at the core, the main concept of this is the carbohydrate and insulin model of fat gain. Really quick to summarize what this is without getting too much into this because I could spend like an hour talking about this. Insulin is the main anabolic hormone in your body. And I know some of you guys out there may hear that magical word anabolic. Isn't that good? Not exactly, because that is focusing on the good aspects of anabolic. A lot of you guys have probably heard of the term anabolic steroids, and anabolic meaning get bigger. You think, awesome, get muscle. Well, not exactly. Anabolic means getting bigger in any way, shape, or form, whether it be putting on muscle or unfortunately putting on body fat. Same reason why catabolic can be a bad thing in the sense that you are losing muscle, but it could also be a good thing in the sense that you are losing fat. Essentially, anabolic is getting bigger and catabolic is getting smaller. Whether that be getting bigger in muscle or fat, that's getting a little bit more specific. So in the case of insulin, the reason that it is an anabolic hormone is it's one of the main hormones involved in pretty much signaling to your body, hey, we got some food incoming. When you consume food, especially certain foods such as carbohydrates and primarily processed carbohydrates such as sugar, this causes massive insulin spikes. This signals to your body, hey, we have some food coming in. It's time to start taking glucose out of the bloodstream and shuttling it into places like your liver, your muscle cells, your fat cells, things like that. Essentially, it's saying, hey, we got some food. It's time to start, switching into anabolic mode and storing it. This could be in terms of muscle mass or unfortunately in terms of fat. And that's kind of what this whole insulin model of obesity and fat gain, that's what it focuses on. So at its core, there are actually two main reasons for why people associate insulin with being a very problematic hormone when it comes to weight loss and obesity. The first one is that insulin being an anabolic hormone, if you are constantly eating food which causes these insulin spikes, it is essentially going to take your body out of this fat burning mode, this catabolic mode, and constantly bombarding your body with sugary carbohydrate high foods is going to constantly, give you these insulin spikes, never giving you the actual ability for your body to go into that fat burning mode. The second issue actually involves another hormone, leptin. For those of you guys that don't know, leptin is a very important hormone in your body for signaling, hey, we're full. It's involved in satiety signaling. Satiety being just a fancy way of saying, hey, we're full, no more food required. So what actually happens is insulin has been hypothesized to go and inhibit leptin. Pretty much you still have leptin, but it can't do its job because in comes insulin and it's just like, this is very problematic because what you end up having is individuals who eat food, especially high carbohydrate, high refined sugars, and then insulin spikes are going to go shut up leptin. And in this case, even though you may have just eaten a big meal, especially one with lots of refined carbohydrates, leptin can't say, we're good, no more food required. And then doing so within 1 hour, you're hungry again. And this makes it very difficult to eat in a calorie deficit because you're constantly hungry. And then unfortunately, to add insult to injury, part of this theory involves the fact that individuals who are overweight, chronically overweight, going as far as to be obese for extended periods of time, these individuals are actually going to have higher levels of circulating insulin in their body, and they're going to develop things like insulin resistance. Bad things trigger more bad things. The fatter you are, the fatter you get, and the longer you are that way, the more and more difficult it is for you to get lean. So this is why individuals who subscribe to this notion, this concept, or this theory of fat gain believe that things like the low carb, high fat, or to take it to an even higher extent, the ketogenic diet, where you're not just low carb, you are like, there are almost no carbs in your diet. Ketogenic diets are something as low as 20, 30, 40 grams of carbohydrates at the most. They are very high fat, very high protein. Pretty much the only carbohydrates you're getting would be in the form of very high fiber vegetables. No breads, no potatoes, no pastas, no rice, definitely no sweet stuff. Even fruit is probably very difficult to get when you're trying to eat in a ketogenic diet. And a low carb, high fat diet would pretty much be just a less extreme version of the ketogenic diet, where you're eating as low as 20, 30, 40 grams of carbohydrates. With a low carb, high fat diet, perhaps you're doing something in the nature of 100, 120, maybe 150 grams of carbohydrates. Not rock bottom, but still very low for what most people are consuming when they are dieting, using just general flexible dieting methodologies. A diet with minimal carbohydrates, primarily minimal refined, highly processed carbohydrates such as sugars, sucrose, high fructose corn syrup, even artificial sweeteners have been hypothesized to actually increase insulin secretion. If you have less of that, you're going to have less insulin secretion, less frequent insulin secretion, and this supposedly is going to give you less of that fat gaining anabolic mode and less of that leptin suppression. This is actually where intermittent fasting comes in, and which is interesting because intermittent fasting has actually been described almost as a cousin of the low carb, high fat, or the, taking it further, the ketogenic model or theory of dieting. Because if at its core, all of this, revolves around insulin and having foods which cause less insulin spikes, well, what causes less of an insulin spike than nothing, than no food at all? This is one of the key reasons why some individuals out there are super big advocates of the intermittent fasting nutritional approach. They believe that when it comes to intermittent fasting, if you close your actual, amount of time you spend eating, instead of eating from like 8 in the morning until midnight and eating essentially over the course of 16 hours, no, if you decrease your meal frequency and you only eat within something around like 8, 6, or even 4 hours, hell, you can even eat like one meal. Fast for 23 hours, then eat one big ass 2,000 calorie meal for 1 hour. In doing so, you are still getting the same number of calories and macronutrients, but because you're eating less frequently, you're having less of those insulin spikes and you're spending more time in this catabolic state. And the crazy thing, guys, when I say it's kind of like a revolution or a coup d'etat and there's a bit of controversy going around, I'm not saying that just to embellish and exaggerate. No, there's actually some crazy stuff going on. For example, I saw on Twitter Alan Aragon and Timothy Noakes, two individuals who are both, well-respected individuals in their own fields in terms of exercise science and nutrition, all that stuff. They actually got in a bit of a Twitter war, and it started off relatively professional, but then it started getting personal, calling you out on your individual credentials, and it was getting a bit heated. And I thought this was pretty funny because you've got these two guys who are like 40 and 50 or something, and they're essentially scientists, and they're bickering at each other with personal insults, reminiscent of like 18-year-old girls. And the funny thing is that this has actually hit home with me personally in the past. I released a video about 6, 7, 8 months ago, and essentially this video talked about how all the fad diets, we're talking keto, paleo, vegan, pescatarian, all of these things, essentially the reason that they all technically do work is because in some way, shape, or form, they just elicit a calorie deficit. In some cases, they just trick you into going into a calorie deficit, meaning that all of these diets are going to be successful as long as you stick to them, because at its core, they essentially do the same thing. And on that video, I actually got a lot of flack specifically for one diet form, the ketogenic or the low carb, high fat diet. I got a lot of comments from you guys saying pretty much no, essentially promoting this whole insulin model of fat gain and obesity. And a lot of you guys actually said, go check out a certain individual, Dr. Jason Fung, and actually a medical doctor here in Toronto, so he's a local guy. And you know what, guys? I'm not the kind of person who, look, I'll be honest. I like being right. I know, shocker, as if I'm in the minority. But to be honest, the one thing I do like more than being right, in the cases that I am wrong, is to find out what is the truth. That is the number one biggest priority for me. So I actually took you guys up on that offer. This is pretty much the book which he kind of like uses to advocate his whole model of weight gain and obesity. And I read this thing cover to cover, I took notes, and I gotta be honest, I enjoyed it. It was a good book. It was just facts and then supporting it with a lot of scientific resources. But that's all cool, that's nice, you're saying all this stuff. Is it actually true? Does the evidence support it? And that's where it gets a little bit controversial. Guys, one thing I do want to say off, for the record right away, is that although this is interesting, although there is some science supporting it, right now, my personal position, just for full disclosure, I do still firmly sit on the side of flexible dieting. I do believe that assuming you eat a high protein, calorie deficient diet, you could essentially put yourself into a state of fat loss, whether you're eating moderate carb, moderate fat, high carb, whatever you do, fat and carbohydrates, in my opinion, at this time, based on the research that I have seen, is still relatively interchangeable. That being said, I am interested in this. I am interested because there is some science behind it. I'm also interested because why is it that out of all the diets out there, all these fad diets, why is it this one in particular which is gaining so much traction? So digging a little bit more into the actual evidence behind this, I really wanted to play a devil's advocate, and I wanted to look at the science, because I could easily cherry pick, I'll be honest guys, I could easily cherry pick a bunch of, studies which firmly support my personal beliefs, essentially the whole flexible dieting, if it fits your macros, style of dieting, and I could be like, that's it, case closed, end of story. But that's too easy. Right now with the internet and with like hundreds of thousands of scientific articles out there, you can essentially find something which supports any theory, any notion or mentality that you have. So I did find a few scientific articles on both sides of the argument. When it comes to the pro calories in, calories out, flexible dieting, methodology of nutrition, I found plenty of articles, and the reason that I love them is because what these experiments did is they essentially took individuals, whether it be average, overweight, whatever, and they put them on 2 different diets, and everything was essentially the same in terms of the amount of calorie deficient, calorie deficit that they are eating, the amount of protein that they are eating, the exercise, everything was the same. All they did is they just had, some individuals eat high fat, some individuals eat high carb. And at the end of it, all of these articles found there's essentially no difference. All of these studies essentially advocated that carbohydrates and fat, when it comes to eating, calorie deficit, they're essentially interchangeable and you will get the same results. You will lose the same amount of fat and you will lose the same fat at the same speed. It's not like one is faster than the other. Essentially, they're saying, both of them work, just choose the one that you can stick to the best. One of these articles I actually want to quote directly because it is rather interesting. It's from Howell and Associates from 2017, and it says, and I quote, "Results from a number of sources refute both the theory and the effectiveness of the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis. Instead, risk for obesity is primarily determined by total calorie intake." Damn, that is just like, laying the smack down. Or is it? Because there is still, the other side, the devil's advocate side, which I do want to investigate. When it comes to the other side, the pro-low carb, high-fat diet, there were 3 articles I want to mention. The first one is very interesting because what it did is it took obese individuals and it made them go on a diet for 6 weeks, and then afterwards it made them go on a maintenance period for 6 weeks. Essentially, diet is obviously we're expected to lose fat, and a maintenance period we are expected to stay the same. No weight gain, no weight loss. At the end of the total 12-week period, they took all the individuals and pretty much looking at their actual weight loss progression, they were able to put them and separate them into 3 separate clusters. Clusters A and B did, relatively well. They lost weight at a normal pace, and then when it comes to the maintenance period, they essentially flatlined as they were expected to do so. Some individuals actually continued to lose weight. However, cluster C, it saw somewhat different results. Although they did lose weight, they lost weight at a significantly slower pace than their counterparts in clusters A and B, and also during the period of maintenance, they actually gained weight. It seems that even though they were calculated to consume exactly the amount of calories required to maintain their body weights, somehow they were able to continue increasing body weight and put on additional fat. Now, the interesting thing about this is that they actually did measure these individuals' insulin levels before, during, and after the experiment, and what they found is that in cluster C, they saw a significantly higher amount of circulating blood insulin levels. This led the researchers to the conclusion, and I quote, "The resistance to weight loss and proneness to weight regain could be predicted by the combination of high plasma insulin and inflammatory markers before dietary intervention." This is kind of an interesting concept because it's pretty much saying that we can determine whether or not you're going to have success with a certain diet as opposed to, in comparison to another individual based on your starting, before you've even done anything, based on your starting baseline insulin levels. Another study was kind of interesting because unlike the first one, which is very theoretical based, where they're taking blood and they're trying to make, draw conclusions based on that, that's cool, but the kind of, studies I want to see are the ones where they actually put individuals on different diets, one with high fat, the other one with low fat, and see what the actual differences are. Did these individuals, consuming these two different diets have a discrepancy in their ability and the speed at which they lose body fat? And this one, it actually did say that there was a significant advantage to the individuals on the low carb, high fat diet. One group saw something around 2 to 3 kilograms of weight loss. The other one saw something as high as 6, 7, 8 kilograms of weight loss. We were talking literally over double the ability to lose body fat. That's kind of a big deal considering one was eating a very, very low carbohydrate diet. The other one was eating a relatively normal diet, high protein, 15 to 30% of their energy coming from fats, which is a normal amount, and the rest of it coming from carbohydrates, which is relatively high, if not moderate. However, one big issue with this, and this is probably the one biggest issue I keep on seeing constantly with these diet experiments when it comes to promoting the high fat, low carb diet, is the fact that yes, they did decrease their carbohydrates, but they didn't really monitor other variables as much. In this study, although the individuals who ate lower carb did lose body fat at a greater, propensity, they also ate higher protein. And this is a big issue. I want to see studies which they only say, okay, we're going to switch fat and carbs. One goes up, the other one goes down. Protein, calories, they essentially stay the same. In this study, they cut the carbs, but they didn't monitor, other factors such as protein, and that's kind of a big issue for me. However, I will still admit that the actual discrepancy between protein consumption is only somewhere around 20 to 25 grams, which for an average individual is, still significant. Even taking that aside, the higher ability for the low carb, high fat diet to lose body fat, that was pretty significant results. Even taking the protein, disparity out of the equation, it was still higher than I expected, and that's kind of interesting. Okay, so you guys may be wondering, okay, Igor, why does this matter? You're telling us all this stuff, but what, difference does it have? What application does it actually have to us? Well, the reason behind this is, look, if we find out that one diet is more efficient at losing body fat, that's a big deal for me. I always want to be doing whatever is optimal in terms of my ability to lose body fat, the speed at which I lose body fat. Obviously, if I can cut down for 3 months as opposed to doing it in 4, 5, 6 months, yeah, I'm gonna go for that. And probably the third, and in my opinion, most important factor, the ease of fat loss. If you take two diets and they are both equally efficient and they will give you, the same amount of body fat in the same amount of time, that's great. But if one is going to be relatively easy and it's not going to be that much issues in terms of interfering with your life, and it's not going to, hunger isn't going to be that much of a problem, whereas the other one makes you want to put a bullet in your head, yeah, you know which one I'm going to be gravitating towards. So this is where it gets interesting. I didn't make this video to just throw some science at you and be like, that's it, have a nice day. No, I am interested in this. I will admit, I am still, I've seen the research, I've seen the science, I've read the content, and it's interesting, and it gets my mind curious, but I'm still somewhat firm on the team flexible dieting, team high carb, high fat, I don't really care, just get your protein, cut your calories, and throw in some exercise. But that being said, I am interested, and even assuming these two diets are the same in terms of their efficacy, if one is easier, I'm really interested in trying that. And that's one thing that I have heard a lot of proponents of this theory, they are pushing that. They are saying that when you are doing things like eating low carb, high fat, and intermittent fasting, because of this, you aren't having issues with hunger, and some of these people say it's just, you don't even notice it. You're eating 2,000 calories a day and it's fine. You don't even have issues with hunger. That's a big thing for me. I'm really interested in that because if I can find a diet which is equally as optimal and efficient but easier, I'm going for it. That is why right now I'm officially announcing that I'm going to be going on a bit of a cut. And I know a lot of you guys out there are thinking like, Igor, what the hell, man? I thought you're not doing another Ascension series. I thought you're not cutting again until 2019. I thought you were going to go on a real bulk. Easy there, chill out, hold your horses. This is not going to be some ridiculous cut. This is not another Ascension series. I am not competing in men's physique this year. That's still being pushed back to 2019. This is not going to be a 4, 5, 6 month cut where I try to get down to 170 pounds and like 8% body fat. But it's not going to be a tiny mini cut either where I just, diet down, lose a few pounds for a week or two. This is going to be a 2-month, a 60-day cut. Essentially, I'm going to be dieting down, but this time around, I'm going to be using this insulin model of fat loss and fat gain as the primary foundation of my nutritional approach. Every single day, I will be tracking both quantitative and qualitative factors. The quantitative factors will obviously be my body weight, and in addition, my estimated body fat percentage. This will be done using my body analyzer scale. I've actually had this scale for about 1.5 years now, which is good because last year, I have all this data, both testing my weight and my body fat percentage, and I'll be doing the exact same thing again this year. We're gonna be tracking things like body weight loss on a weekly level, body fat percentage loss on a weekly level, and the main goal this time around is assuming I'm eating the same way in terms of calories, and I'm training the same way in terms of training in the gym for hypertrophy and cardiovascular training, assuming I keep all these factors the same, but I switch my dietary strategy from, moderate carb, moderate fat to high fat, low carb. Will I experience a difference in my ability to lose body fat, how fast I lose body fat, and how easy it is for me to lose body fat? Because qualitatively, I will be tracking things like mood, energy, hunger, all of these things on a daily level. I will be tracking on a scale of 1 to 5. So you wake up in the morning, you feel, amazing. You're like, it's a beautiful day. I'm so excited. My mood is a 5. I go to the gym. I have an awesome workout. My energy is a 5. But my hunger, it's not that good. I would probably say, let's say the hunger is at a 4. 5 being starving, 1 being no hunger at all. We're gonna be tracking all these things the entire time. That way, in addition to the quantitative, the actual ability to lose weight and how fast you lose it, we're also gonna be tracking how well do I feel? What's my hunger like? Because again, these things, they are inherently both very important in my overall diet strategy, especially when I'm trying to determine what is the best diet strategy. So guys, that is it. That is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. This is technically going to be episode 1, I believe, although it's not much of a vlog. Episode 2, we're gonna get more back into the standard vlog lifestyle. We're gonna be doing physique updates. We're gonna be doing weight trajectory analysis. We're gonna be doing all that cool stuff. We got the numbers, the math, the training, but at the same time, you get welcome back to my life. It's been a little bit of time since we've done the vlog style stuff, so get ready for more exciting Vitruvian physique lifestyle. And by that, I mean 80% is gonna be me at the gym and eating chicken. See you then! Hadouken!